I am so super pumped for you to hear this episode. My friend, Elena Ciccotelli from the Side Gig Central podcast is here with me today, and she spills the tea on everything side gig related. And that means you and your side gig are going to win big after today's episode. Are you ready to dive in? I know I am. Episode 139 starts right now. Hey there, welcome to the Laura Shipman Show. We hang out here weekly to talk about things like social media, entrepreneurship, marketing, tools, strategies, tips, and it all starts right now. Hey there, before we get started with this show, I just want to share my passion with you. I love teaching people just like you how to master social media for business, breaking it down into easy to consume and easy to execute steps so that you can see immediate results. So whether you want to start a social media consultancy or grow your brand's presence on social media, I can help. I can help you get started and master all the things that you need to know. So I want you to go over to my website. It is filled with resources, tools, tips, and courses. Visit laurashipman.com. That's LORA Shipman.com to get all the goods. Now, you ready for the show? I know I am. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I'm so excited because my guest is here today, Elena Ciccotelli from the Side Gig Central podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Laura. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I am a huge fan.
And I'm a huge fan of yours I love the topic we're talking about today and everything you are all about. So for the people who don't know you yet, can you give them a little bit of a bio on who you are, what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Elena, and I am a side gig entrepreneur. I actually started out as a personal trainer in 2008, and I scaled my personal training company up to a six-figure company over the span of 10 years. And then scaled it all the way back down to a side gig. I then got involved with a corporate job, which I currently have. I work for Lyft in their corporate sales department. And I started the Side Gig Central podcast because I am an entrepreneur at heart. I absolutely love building businesses. And because of my experience at Lyft, and I worked with a lot of rideshare drivers, the term just side gig just kept coming up all the time. And I would speak to the drivers like, how many other gigs are you doing? And it was just like such a hot topic. And then I thought to myself, a side gig is really the beginning of a small business, right? Yes. And a lot of them didn't really totally click. And then just me being an entrepreneur and having that experience of scaling up a business to six figures, there is something to this. And I don't think there's a woman talking about this topic in a way that will help inspire other women and other entrepreneurs to get started, but in a way that's going to offer tactical advice. So that was the Cliff Notes version. That was just glossed over some of the main points.
I love that because I think we're in an era right now where people are exploring their side gig alter ego. And for people who don't understand really what a side gig looks like, can you kind of tell us, if you were to describe what a side gig really looks like to somebody, what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two different categories, right? One can just be a hobby, which you're not monetizing. You get immense joy and pleasure out of this thing. For me, it equates to ballet. I was a ballet dancer for 20 years, and I am not monetizing that right now. It's just something that I enjoy. I'd like to, take classes every once in a while, but that's really a hobby, right? And then at some point, if you feel like that hobby could be monetized, could be something a little bit more, you want to get a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole, then I think you would turn it into a side gig, something that you're working on. Obviously, it's not full-time, couple hours a week, depending upon what feels comfortable to you. But that side gig is a business model. And I really encourage all of the listeners that listen to my show and followers to make sure that you're setting up the framework for your side gig in a professional way. Make sure you're setting yourself up for success because, like I said, a side gig is a small business. And I think we can get caught up and a lot of the excitement and the newness of it, right? And we're not really setting ourselves up for success. So I'd highly recommend, even if it's just, you have an Etsy shop, or you have a podcast, you have a copywriting business, something where you're providing, well, I deal with a lot of businesses that are services that have turned into side gigs. But as long as you have that initial framework set up, you're going to be really enabling yourself to scale if you would like to. Kind of put that asterisk at the end. If you would like to, it's not mandatory. It can stay a side gig, and just because you have a side gig doesn't mean you're a failure as an entrepreneur. If anything, I think it makes you really smart, because guess what? Apple started as a side gig. Spanx with Sarah Blakely started as a side gig while she was selling fax machines door to door. Okay. And now Spanx is the worldwide phenomenon that we know today. So don't pigeonhole yourself and think about, I'm not doing it full time. It's just, I still have my full-time job, and I haven't fully committed. I'm using air quotes here. I haven't fully committed to my side gig to scale up. So get rid of that limiting belief, because I think you're able to scale in a smart way, and you're able to bootstrap, which I'm sure we'll talk about bootstrapping in a bit as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple of questions. The first one is, are there anything, or is there some advice that you can give our listeners to what foundational elements they should have in place? Because a lot of people who have this side gig thing going on probably don't know that they have the side gig going on, because they enjoy doing it so much, right?
Right.
And so they never
Yeah.
thought of it as a business, and maybe they do some things for money, but maybe not a lot. But now we've all of a sudden turned that switch on in their head, and they're probably sitting there thinking, oh, what does that foundational thing look like? So do you have some tips that they could kind of follow?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, please, please, please go register yourself as either an LLC. Really, an Inc. probably is not needed in the early side gig stage. At least get an LLC, right? Get registered for the state. Get your tax EIN number. That is an absolute must. And then I also highly recommend that you buy your domain name, right? Whatever you think your side gig business will be called, go ahead, get the $8 domain name, because you know what? It is going to make you look so much more prepared and so much more professional when you start having your emails going out from Elena at sidegigcentral.com versus Elena at gmail.com. So it gives you that level of professionalism. I would also make sure, if you are not a fan of accounting, like
my hand is so high up right now.
As high as it can go, right? Please, please, please go ahead and invest in either consulting with a bookkeeper or hiring a bookkeeper, just someone that has your back, because you do not want to be caught in a situation where you're not saving enough of the invoices that you have coming in. You're not saving enough of that income to then have in reserve for Uncle Sam that's going to be knocking on your door and saying, what about me? Hi, you haven't paid the taxes on, right? So making sure that you have that advice is critical. So I would say those three things are very, very basic foundations. And then from there, you can get a little bit fancier, but those three things.
So I would think that you would want to reserve your domain name, but you don't necessarily have to have a website right away. Like, people are probably thinking that's bigger than me right now.
Oh, no. So at least just get it in reserve. And you know what also too, that does not require any website building skills, is to set up an email address with your domain.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Do that.
Just do the basics. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I love that. So we've got our foundations in place. And then I guess my next question would be, like, where do we even start now? Now that we've got foundations, now what? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that has helped me in the past, actually two things I'll mention. The first is you don't know what your ideal client is right away. Like you're dabbling in this a lot of times this is a brand new industry for you, right? And you haven't really nailed down who that ideal client avatar is for you. I've had many experiences where I thought I knew what that person looked like, but I was very wrong and had to pivot. So I would say network like crazy, and not only network with people who you think would be falling into that bucket of your ideal client, but network with other allies, other partners, other people who you look up to into that space. Now, don't get into the comparison game because that's very how do we say, that's very energy draining, right? You want to keep your energy up here because your side gig should be a source of creative freedom, right? So you want to feel like you can reach out to people. I mean, if you're in the social media space, reach out to Laura. Like if you're looking to start a side gig, you can reach out to me, but look for those allies, reach for those partners that are going to help you along the way, because they're going to be 5, 10, 15 steps ahead of where you are. You can learn from them, and guess what, all of that, unless you're paying for a business coach, is free.
Yeah oh, it's so
right?
true.
So keep your eyes open, pay attention. And the other thing I would add to this too is look at what you think your competitors are doing too. What are the things that they're not doing? What are the ways that you can position yourself as a unique commodity really in the marketplace? So how can you position yourself, and what's the messaging that's not being talked about maybe, or how can you fulfill, how can you solve that problem? Really, that's in a unique way. So I wouldn't really necessarily get hung up too much on, I have to get 10 clients this month, or I have to sell 10 of these handbags that I made. Instead, I would set benchmarks with how many new people did I network with this month? How many times did I, engage with a potential client? And I'm talking about early stages. You're going to eventually, find your groove, and people are going to start coming to you. Like that's just naturally how it is, because then you need to also assert your authority, like what you're talking about in your space, right? So you're going to need some of that social proof, and you're going to have to be doing a lot of things gratis, right? For a while. Like that's just what it is. So, but again, that's why I say the combination of working on your side gig while you're fully employed, right? While you have something else going on in the background that is paying your bills. So you don't have that intense pressure that's, built up around this new endeavor, because the first formula that you come up with is not going to be the formula that works. It's not.
It's not. It's just not going to work.
It's not going to work. Right. So I'll give you an example. I started off the podcast, fresh off of just doing a ton of driver recruitment for Lyft. And I thought my ideal audience was going to be Uber and Lyft drivers.
Interesting.
It turned out that no one from rideshare cared about my podcast. Like nobody was listening from that community. And then as I kind of got a little bit deeper into the freelance economy and having guests on the show like that, and then it turned into I don't want to say a full-on woman empowerment thing, but it turned into more of helping business owners that have or potentially want to have a service-based business get started, and strategies and tips. So it evolved, and it was a process that took some time to figure out. So, that's the cool thing about a side gig is you don't have to pigeonhole yourself. You're not paying for a brick and mortar facility, which I know is very sensitive these days, right? You can absolutely work on this remotely, pay attention to your competitors, and ask for help. There's no shame in that game.
I think you're totally right. And I think if you look at the people who've gone before you, they're happy to mentor people. whether
Yeah.
it's directly or indirectly. So directly could be like just getting on a Zoom call like we are now or whatever and talking and asking questions, or it could be indirectly through a podcast or through a blog or things like that. The help is out there if you just know what to look for.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we have so many really great resources at our fingertips.
Yes.
And it's there. And I know you talk about this all the time on your show. I always tune in. I'm like, oh, what wisdom is Laura gonna drop on me today? I can't wait. But I mean, you do such a great job of pointing out all of those tools that we can get our hands on immediately. And then
Thank you.
so from there, it's like what's your excuse now?
Exactly. Exactly. Actually, and I'm glad you bring that up right now because I have a question about the here and now and the right now. Do you think that now is the time somebody should look? Because we're all at home right now. We're not going anywhere very far at the time of this recording.
That's right. That's right. Yes, we are
So
homebound.
we are homebound. So do you think now is a good time to launch a side gig business?
Yeah. So we had chatted about this a little bit before we hit the record button, and I think if you find yourself in a situation where you maybe have reduced hours from your full time job, or you are working your full time job and you find yourself, I don't know, binging Netflix or scrolling social media for hours, I would say instead take that time, take that opportunity to expand your skill set, find out what you really like to do.
Yeah.
Because there's so many ways you can monetize something that you love to do. So take the time to explore that because you never know when those skills are going to be really utilized. So I always go back to the example of padding your resume with a side gig. So this is kind of a radical concept, but I really think it applies here. So say, for example, you're thinking about, and I will use dog walking as an example. Say you're thinking about starting off a dog walking business, right? You go on Rover, you start taking on clients, you start walking the dogs, snuggles with the puppies, the whole thing, right? And then you start getting 5-star reviews. You start getting really great client feedback. All of those things are soft skills that you can now say to another potential employer down the line and say, look at this. I built my own business because I gave a remarkable experience. I have some inkling of operations, right? You have to schedule things and you have to be able to have some sort of business acumen to get, that done.
Yes.
And then you need to, also have customer satisfaction because they're giving their dog to you and they're trusting you that experience. So I say all of that just to illustrate the point that even if you don't think that your side gig necessarily will end up scaling up to Sarah Blakely and Spanx, right?
Right.
That's a very high mountain to climb.
Sure.
And not everybody wants to be a business owner. Not everybody is like, I really want to be an entrepreneur. But maybe that using this time, maybe that experience of doing your side gig will parlay a skill set or illustrate further a skill set that you are really, really great at delivering, and then throw that onto your resume and say, here, even if you do want to pivot in your career, you're switching to a different industry, I think is really valuable.
I think you're right. And I also think if you are a new side gigger or even maybe like an experienced one, now is a great time to test concepts, don't you think?
Oh, yes,
And
absolutely.
kind of use this time like as a laboratory so that you can see what works, what doesn't work.
Oh, for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
Because what we end up doing is we start to figure out what are the weaknesses and what are the strengths. And when you're bootstrapping, you get to find that out really fast.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have some outside source funding your side gig. You see everything that's coming in
Mm-hmm.
everything that's going out.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can see real quick, like where you're falling on that balance sheet. So I'm a really big believer in trying to get to profitability as soon as possible. And the only way that you're going to do that is to be bootstrapping. Do not borrow money from a family. I don't care how tempting it is. If you really want to test out a concept, you bootstrap it. You save, a portion of your paycheck coming in to put towards the side gig, and you say, because at the end of the day, you are not going to have that anxiety or that stress of I have to owe X, Y, and Z to pay off this debt. It's tough enough to figure out a viable business model. Right. So, absolutely. Laboratory all the way.
Laboratory all the way. So you mentioned bootstrapping. What things can people bootstrap in their side gig business? Because I imagine people who want to start a side gig business think to themselves, my God, this is too expensive. Times are tight right now as it is. You might be on a temporary furlough or you might be laid off or something like that. What things make sense to bootstrap and what does that look like?
Yeah, service-based businesses, I mean, you need a laptop and Wi-Fi. Let's be real. I
Mhm.
mean, that is for all intensive purposes. And I'm sorry, your smartphone. don't
Yes.
forget your don't forget your phone. Those three things can take you extremely far. So any type of like I said, service-based business, and even if you have an e-commerce shop and you need to ship things out, is there a way that you can negotiate a better deal with your partners, or is there a way to in-house any of that? And you need to be a stickler, an absolute stickler for what expenses you have going out there. So
Mhm.
I'll also take, for example, I thought that when I was really active on YouTube, I was going to need this like whole elaborate video set up and like this. And
Mhm.
I ended up just doing all my videos on my phone and then editing it in Camtasia and then uploading the video. So it's really amazing what you could do with these tools that are online, very cheap. Udemy is also really good if for learning a new skill. Now, I wouldn't recommend, like, if you have no idea about websites and you're like, oh gosh, I need a website. Like, you don't have to learn HTML like that unless you want to.
Right, right.
I mean, you can if you actually want to do that. But if you feel like this will not add joy to my life right now, it'll make me feel overwhelmed. There are so many ways that you can, again, like I said in the beginning, partner with other entrepreneurs that are experts in that space. So leverage those experts, and just really start with what you have. You don't have to have this big elaborate set. You can build up to
Mhm.
that big elaborate setup, but prove your business model first and foremost. If I could just give one more example here. So I started my personal training company with $50. I started it with dumbbells, some like very, very basic equipment. And I just thought to myself, if I can teach myself a couple new skills, get like average at blogging and average at YouTube. Like, I don't have to
Mhm.
be like expert level at these things. I just be like average. Okay, now I have some like tools in my back pocket that I can start leveraging. That's where you start bootstrapping, and then that's where you see the growth.
That's really cool. Okay, cool. Okay, so I have a question, and I don't know if you have any trusted sources or anything like that, but do you have recommendations of resources that someone who's starting a side gig could go to learn? Like, where do they learn? Besides just going to Google.
Yeah, well, they can tune into the podcast. No, just
Yes.
kidding.
No. Seriously. Give the name of the podcast again because it is huge
Yeah,
as a resource.
yeah, no, they absolutely they could listen to the Side Gig Central podcast. I am still sticking to my weekly publishing schedule, so I have new episodes every week, and I would say episode number 4, how to start a side gig with zero.
Oh.
I go through everything top to bottom,
Okay.
even like some mindset thing. So that's like a 45-minute episode. That is by far the most popular one on the show. And then, yeah, I mean, obviously Google is a really great resource too, but I would say take a look at some of these really great courses that they have, either through Udemy or you can also look at, I think it's called Teachable. There's some really great resources there that you can take a look at. But I really feel like you can get a lot out of podcasts. You can get a lot out of YouTube channels. You know, Sunny Lenarduzzi is really great on YouTube. Amy Landino, formerly Schmidt Hour, is really great. You know, so a lot of the work has been done already, right? So I highly doubt that you're about to embark on a route that hasn't been tried before. Okay. So those inroads are there. It's just you have to carve out your piece that's unique. So yeah, like we were talking about before, I think those resources out there. And you know, even if you're well, you're definitely not going to the gym right now, because I was going to say, if you're going to the gym, you pop in your earphones and start listening. But yeah, that's what I would say there for resources.
Okay, cool. So I'm a side gigger, and I've decided that I am going to scale my business to the next level. Like, what does that time management look like? Because I'm still working, let's pretend I'm still working full time, but I've got this side gig. How do you what's the time commitment there? And how do you manage your time so you can do both? And then when do you make that transition to jump off and go full into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I always say here for time management is, how much of this work can I get done comfortably without getting fired? What is that? What is that? What does it look like? And that's different for everybody.
Yeah. No.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I would never recommend to someone to go do an untested business model while you know, you might have a soul sucking full-time job that you don't enjoy, but it would be irresponsible of me to tell someone, just go and leave and just jump and do something that's into the unknown. Instead, you're leaping with a parachute. You are leaping, you're dabbling, because what happens if this untested business model and your side gig doesn't pan out? Like it's not going well. It's okay. It was a learning experience. But you still have income, right? You still have the income coming in. It's not going to be a huge, disruption to your life. So in terms of when to know when to jump, so there's a level of financial income that you're used to having, right? So if there's a way that you can figure out, okay, if I make X, Y, and Z sales for this amount of time, and it has to be over a time period, right? Because when you're starting a side gig, it's going to be very inconsistent. You're going to have high months, you're going to have low months. You don't even know about seasonality yet. And now what we're dealing with now in the economy, that throws another wrench into it, right? Yeah. Exactly. So you don't know, say you start your side gig in March, right? No, you should be. Start your side gig in March. Just go. Start it. I want you to see a whole year. If you can stick with it a whole year, so you see the entire year, what it's like, and you can get a better picture. So you're not flying blind. You're coming into something that's going to be that you've tested, that you know what February 2021 is going to look like for you. So then you can make educated projections for those months, right? You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot and just like, I've done this for 2 months. I think I can crank out, 5 or 10 incremental sales in the next couple of months. So you don't know.
You don't know. The thing.
Yeah. You don't know. So I would recommend doing it. If you can hang in there for a year, that would be like best case scenario. If something actually happens with your full-time job, like we had mentioned before, a lot of people have been furloughed, and they don't really know when that's coming back. I would say, just go with your gut, go with what you feel like you can really make an impact with. But I would not recommend just completely quitting what you have going on in your full-time job. And I would absolutely take the time to nurture that entire evolution of your side gig. It's not going to look the same as when you first started it. It's just not, because
Yeah.
it's going to evolve.
Of course. And I love how realistic you are. Like a lot of people want to hear the answer, give it like 3 months and then quit. But I love your realistic answer about give it a year, because like there is a seasonality that people don't understand to business. And like some businesses drop off in fourth quarter while others take off. And you just don't know where your famine is going to be during the year. And every business has a famine. I don't care how successful it is. Once
Yep.
you feel where that lull is, you know how to prepare for it. And having that past history is just going to make you so much more successful for the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And think of all of the new, really interesting business insights you're going to learn along the way. Because
Mhm.
now it's like, all right, I had one like test jog around the track.
Yeah, exactly.
Now maybe I can sprint the second lap. And then
Yes.
maybe I can, so it is that, that metaphor. But I do think there is a lot of talk, chatter, if you
Mhm.
will, on social media that makes it very tempting to
Mhm.
say, I'm just going to throw in the towel on what I'm doing now and go full force into this new venture because I want to be my own boss. I want to be my own person. That's great. I will be your number one hype girl to be an entrepreneur. But I am telling you, just try it out first. Just
Yeah.
try it out. You don't even know if you enjoy doing the work yet. You have no clue.
You don't know. And I think people don't realize too what it's like to be their own boss. I think it gets glamorized a lot. And I think we also see a lot of, and I'm going to use air quotes now, overnight successes that took 15 years to get there.
Oh,
Right.
yeah,
And
for
so,
sure.
and so for you to say, yeah, I'm going to scrap everything after 2 months is kind of unrealistic. Plus, you don't know what you're biting off either. I mean, there's so many things that you're responsible for as a business owner. And if you're going to also have employees or even people that you outsource stuff to, you're responsible for paying them as well. So you've got all
Yes.
these other people depending on you. And it's a lot of grunt work, a lot of grit. It's long nights, early mornings, all
The
that
whole
stuff.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing. And I think as you start to get into a groove and as you start to find your way, you're going to be able to say, and you had mentioned outsourcing, you're going to find, I think you talked about this on a prior episode, your zone of genius,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
What you're really, really talented with and what is really going to drive the revenue for your company and just in doing those things, right? And then being able to say, all right, if I have X amount of revenue coming in, can I allocate a portion of that to the things that I do not enjoy? Bookkeeping, website design, whatever the case may be.
Yep. No, I totally agree. That's great advice, and it's a great way to look at the side gig and when to transition over, because unless you're in a situation where you don't have a job right now, you know,
Mm,
or laid off or something, then you jump in, I
yeah.
think 2 feet. I mean, that's kind of what happened to me at one point. I started my business with $60, and
Ah,
yes, but I
yes.
and I did everything you said. I bootstrapped. I kind of meandered around to try and find where my zone of genius was, and then I stuck with it. And my zone of genius happened to be social media, but it wasn't yet invented, right?
Oh,
So
man,
I was
so
like
interesting.
floundering for a couple of years until I found where I needed to be. So
Wow.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I think, and I love your story too, because you're just such a great example of like sticking with it and sticking with a vision that you
Mhm.
really believe in. And like, just every time I turn on your podcast, I was
Thank
in
you.
the car, I was like, oh, there it is, voice of an angel. I'm going to
Oh,
learn
you're
some
so
stuff.
sweet. You're so sweet. Thank
Stop
you.
it. Yeah, of course.
So I just loved our conversation today. Is there anything that you would want to leave us with or go over before we leave today that maybe we didn't cover when it comes to winning big with your side gig?
Yes, absolutely. So I would like to end on not a I would like to end on a positive note, but it is also wrapped up in a warning. And that is, make sure that you are not letting your pride or your ego stop you from realizing if a business model is not working.
Oh, that's such good advice.
Make sure that you are looking at your numbers objectively, because there have been a number of situations that I have found myself in personally where I hung on to a business for too long because of my pride, because of my identity was so wrapped up into that business. Business is meant to help us flourish in life, right? It's meant to help us do the things that we want to do. It's not there to be a slave to our business. So be realistic with it. Don't get, see if you can separate it's so hard though too, because if you're really passionate about it and you're the face of your brand, I get it because I've been there. Just do your best. If you have, a second pair of eyes or a third pair of eyes to help you distinguish the two, all right, am I really getting my ego caught up in this? But take a good look at that, and you'll be unstoppable at that point when you can really see what's going on. Oh, unstoppable.
That is amazing advice. I love that. So where can people find you on social media if they want to follow you and get all these jewels of knowledge that you're sending their way?
Oh, yes, the jewels of knowledge. So they can absolutely go find me on Instagram. I am there a lot. That's my favorite place to hang out on social media. So go search for the Side Gig Central podcast. And also on Twitter, you can look me up at Elena, ELENA _side gig. Not as much on Facebook as I should be, but you can absolutely look me up there. My website is sidegeekcentral.com. And of course, go listen to the podcast. Side Geek Central is on all of your favorite podcast players.
Awesome. I'm going to link to all of that in the show notes, especially, what was it, episode number 4, how to start a side gig?
Yes, episode number 4. That's going to be your primer to get started.
Yeah, we'll definitely link to that. And I have some other links from you too that we will share. Elena, this was so great. It was so much fun interviewing you today and such great information.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. This has been a dream. If I could just add really quickly, I would always listen to your podcast when I was driving to my full-time job. I'm like, yes, I'm going to learn so much from Laura today. It's going to be amazing. So thank you for that. Thank you for all the work you do.
Oh, thank you for that, Elena. That's so sweet.
Of course. Anytime, girl.
Hey there, I just want to say thank you for spending time with me here today. I know your time is super valuable, which is why I am dedicated to providing lots of usable, actionable information in the shortest amount of time possible. Before you go, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a future episode. And if you have ideas or topics you would like me to cover in an upcoming show, let me know about it in the comment section provided.